Alright, I am going to literally try my best to get as much of this as possible. I got an X-Acto knife because I figure if we're going to cut the shims on these caps, I may as well just go for it. And we're going to have either failure or success. I shellacked these in the other day, and we're going to go ahead and cut them. So we got, obviously, a lot of stuff going on in the background because this is like a live house. You know, I am working in my basement. My wife's doing laundry in the background. Finn's over here trying to pee on clean clothes. But essentially, I have to cut out the openings for the bolts. There's a little bit of goop left in there, but it's not a big deal. We have to trim the edges because the trick to all of this is cutting it down to size. So we're using our trusty X-Acto knives, which are making quick work of this. And we also have to kind of like imprint it, so I'm going to go ahead and run my round end of the X-Acto knife on the edge so I can verify the sharp point and where to cut. These caps do have a taper on the one side where they are going to sit in the block, so that is something I'm also looking for. And alright, so that end's done. We left our bevel open so that the shim wouldn't get caught on the block. Fold this one over. Again, I have to kind of closely follow that edge. I can't really go in underneath. This one I can cut on the outside because I'm not worried about it. But that looks good. To trim off some of the excess stuff left. But our main cap looks pretty good. That's our shim stock. And our shellac still hasn't fully set up, but it will dry up eventually and it will harden up. But I actually want it to stay soft because when I go ahead and I put it in the block and torque it down, I want it to kind of squish down, and I'm probably going to let it set for a little bit. That way it'll be all set up. So I'm only going to do like the one main cap because it'll be redundant to sit here and do like all of them. My wife's really yelling at the dog. But I'm going to go ahead and there we go. Our bevel is exposed. Now I have to again imprint our edge here, which if I'm smart I'll use the knurl end to also work kind of like an abrasive so that I can kind of nicely cut. There we go. You see that that knurled end on the X-Acto knife really comes in handy. This is really old school. The shim stock for clearances. This is something that was done probably in the 50s, 40s, stuff like that. You know, if you can't, I mean, you can't add material to the cap technically, but the shim stock doesn't really deteriorate. The shellac is actually solvent proof, so that's kind of like a nice thing about it. Now another thing we got to keep in mind is our notch for the bearing tang is there too on this one. So we have to cut right up top, go around the tang. And I mean, I wish I could show you guys better, but this is, again, I'm literally cutting the first cap, kind of like, if you will, almost live. And again, this is 1 thou shim stock. Obviously, we already did this once, and the engine survived totally fine. So this is actually our number 1 cap. Our number 5 does not take one. That clearance was left pretty damn good. So now I'm going to go ahead and scrape off some of the excessive shellac with my nail, because at this point it's semi-dry. But the whole point is to keep the shim stock in place. And a lot of guys may disagree with this, but we already ran the engine pretty damn hard with this stuff, and our main bearings were all in good shape. So I'll just show you guys, for example, like, so we did the number 1. This is the number 1 set of bearings on the mains. I marked them, and they're pretty good. I don't know how good you guys will be able to see it. The lighting is not exactly the greatest, but we got some, you know, you still have your original silver coating on them. This bearing actually had damage on it from the get-go, but the builder, the machinist I should say, decided to go with the King bearings that I had that had some damage that we kind of cleaned up in the video from a couple years ago, probably 4 years ago almost at this point, where I grabbed a nylon tool and took out some of the dimples and the soft material in the bearing, and then I polished it with newspaper. You could also, I also used 800 and 1000 grit, which is a really, really old school trick. If you read about some of those techniques back in the day, like Top Fuel cars, Nitro cars, they would actually sand down the bearings between runs and rerun them until they smoked them out, because just of the volatility of the nature of the engines, you know, they'd run them until they pretty much blow up, which they would not last very, very long. But yeah, our first cap is all set. I'm going to go ahead and leave this one ready. Obviously, we have to measure our clearances back to front, so I have to actually go ahead and put the number 5 cap in place, torque that down, and the next one to cut would be the number 4. Get that in, torque that in place with the bearings in, and we have to kind of work our way back to front. I could go ahead and do each one individually, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the number 5 cap, measure everything out, and I'll show you guys some of the measurements probably on the number 1 cap, which will be the last one, the easiest one to do. So I'll cut this off here. Alright guys, it's Copper Cutlass, and so before I could really do like the main caps and all that stuff, I'm going to go ahead and install the cam bearings. I haven't finished cutting up the shim stock on the main caps, but I figured before I start doing all that, installing the cam bearings would be the next step. And you guys have to keep in mind that you have to, when you install your cam bearings, which I'll grab right here, they are numbered in their position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there is a part number on them, at least if you're using Durabond. And this is actually what I got laid out here is my cam bearing install tool, and you have to work your way back to front. So we have a centering collet here, which would go in there, and then we would install our tool, which again, this is kind of very specific to the Oldsmobile. So we would go ahead and put our 5 driver in, and we would have to grab the number 5 bearing and line up the hole. So usually I would advise to mark it with a Sharpie, and then when you install it, you have to be able to see the hole, which right now my lighting is not the best, so I am going to have to carefully install it, because the number 5 is kind of like on an angle, so you have to be able to see that hole in there. But you know, that's where we're going to take our number 5, which again, we're going to confirm our part number here, and this is 065. It's 065, it's a 06 bearing. And then we're going to have to also mark the reason for this is as you're driving it in, you can kind of see where it is. Now, the hot ticket would be the back cut bearings for this, but I didn't have those. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in here, get it into position. Alright, which the nice thing about the number 5 is that there is a rib that lines up in the block. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a rib from the number 5 main to that, but we're going to go ahead and get our support in to keep everything stabilized. Now the tool doesn't do all of the work for you, but it gets you really, really close to home. And I can tell you right now, I'm kind of feeling for the hole and the alignment of the hole on the bearing. Now we have to put our steel driver in, otherwise we have no way. We're going to ruin the aluminum because most of the tool is aluminum. It's nice, it's soft, it's light. And again, Toombs Brothers Racing, you can find them on Facebook, sell this tool. It is not cheap, but if you're going to be building your own tools, I've paid to install cam bearings over the years and have spent enough money to let you guys know that it is worth every penny to buy this tool. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to check our alignment, and I think we need to go in just a hair more because I can see a little bit of the ridge on the bearing from here, a little more. But again, this is where being careful, and again, having the centering die in here is very nice because you don't have to worry about like the cone. So right there, I see the full opening of the oil hole on the bearing, and I'm going to install one more so that I can easily show you guys. Actually, I'll install all of them, and so we need number 4 here, and we're going to go ahead and do our number 4. Install it. We'll grab our handy dandy marker, which I threw on the ground like a dumbass. Go ahead, marker center, and also our driver while we're at it, just to kind of keep things kosher there. And we're going to go ahead and get this guy inside here. Now these are going to be easier because you can almost see the hole where the oil hole has to line up with the hole on the main oiling artery, if you will, gallery, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But notice how, I mean, some of our stuff is moving around, but we're stuff is moving around a bit, so I need to tap this out. There we go. This bearing seems to not be complying as well, but go ahead and give it another tap. That'll be just a matter of squaring it up. There we go. Decided to take a quick pause in that last video because I got the bearing in. My oiling hole is lined up. I can see daylight right through it, but our driver was not cooperating on the way out. But our bearing isn't gouged. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take our cam that we're actually going to install and check it, which you should do anyway as you go along. You got to find out where your tight spots are at. If there's any, you should not have any resistance, and we're going to find out. This is with no oil or anything. This tool is really nice, also from Toombs Brothers Racing. Guys out of Ohio, the die-hard Oldsmobile guys, and it appears that even though we don't have our front bearings in, we don't have any tightness of the cam going in, which is good. You should be able to just turn it real easy with no oil. If you are installing your cam bearings and you are, you know, you get your cam in there and it doesn't turn freely with like one thumb, which was always, that's what was explained to me years ago, back when I used to deal with Rocket Racing. John did help me out in the past. he showed me how to properly install cam bearings and what to look for. I had a problem with a bent cam from Howard's that cost me a lot of money to fix and rectify, but ultimately we did fix that problem. So now we're going to pick up our tool, we're going to grab our number 3, we're going to work our way in, make sure we got the correct bearing, 063, and go ahead, mark it with a Sharpie, because again we want to line up our oiling hole, and then I'm also going to go ahead and mark the driver. We're going to go ahead and get this kind of centered in. We're going to put our driver support in, which won't go over the steel driver, so don't mind me. Again, I'm kind of doing this live, and I'm actually going to shorten this up because it'll probably be better. And this is the best part about this, is that you can shorten these up to get more stable. The shorter it is, the better off you're going to be, at least in this situation. Don't convince the ladies with that one. But in this situation, the shorter driver, as we're getting closer towards the outside of the block, is going to be better. And again, I have to put the bearing in place and line up the hole. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Make sure that we're still lined up, because I did give it a twist. So you're going to have to kind of eyeball it. I really wish that I could do this a little bit better, but I can only work with so much. Alright, I can see daylight. That's good. That one went in real easy. Now we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to kind of just check my camera. Alright, so you guys are able to see what I'm doing. With this tool, there is no real guessing. I'm going to go ahead, before I get my number 2 in, we're going to take the camshaft yet again, stick it in there and check it, give it a turn. Some guys may want to do them all and check them, but you don't know which one is screwed up if you do that, because you can bind up anywhere in the engine, and I can just tell by the way it's slid in that everything is actually really good. So I'm going to take my driver out, give it a little turn. We're still good. We got 2 bearings to go, and so far everything is good. So go ahead, get our camshaft out nice and carefully. We're going to set this back on there with our handle, because we're going to need it anyway. So we're going to grab our driver, we're going to grab our number 2 bearing. Again, we're going to mark it with a marker, just to have a visual, even though at this point I am not so much in the dark, especially with that rear one, because of the way that the ribbing and everything on the block goes, but that one can go in just a hair more. I can see a little bit of the lip of the bearing surface. Doesn't take much to get it in, guys. But yeah, I can see daylight through all that, so that one's good. We're going to go ahead, put our driver down, put our camshaft in yet again. Being careful. Again, we have one more bearing to go here. That spins real nice. Real easy. So that's a plus. We know that we got one left. One last opportunity to completely fuck this up. Because, well, you would have to order a whole different, whole new set of bearings just for that one. I actually think I may have a spare set of cam bearings if I needed it, but our last one, confirm the number, 061, we're good. Again, this one I'm not even going to mark it because this one is a lot easier to keep track of. We don't have an oil restrictor on there. And this one, we're kind of are left in the wild here because this is the one where you don't have, you have to line up the bevel. On this one it's a little trickier, so we got the bearing actually kind of sitting in there on the bevel on its own, and I forgot about this because to be honest with you, the last time I installed the cam bearings was on the engine that's actually in the car now. So we're actually going to go ahead and change all of this. And the only thing we got on the number one is the bottoming out flange. And you're going to keep this one real short. Again, this tool is specific, but that flange is the stopping point, and it's also the way that it's going to square the bearing in. So now that we are done, let's get all of our drivers out of the way here. I hope I'm not fucking this up because otherwise you guys didn't see much, did you? So we're going to go ahead, install the cam. This tool works good but still supported as you're going in. Again, this is a lot easier with the crankshaft out. So we're going to take this out. We're going to give her a spin. No tight spots, everything is good. I didn't want it to do that. I'm trying to keep it off of the face of the block because that face of the block is also going to give you some resistance. So, but you can turn it with no oil, one hand, just grabbing the dial with our thumb, and that's what we want. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of a semi-lube on there, and the camshaft is kind of going to stay in place for now, I guess. I have to figure out what I want to do actually, because I can put the camshaft in later. It's just always easier without the crank. But then I have to also worry about snotting up the lifters and getting our semi-lube on there. And, you know, you don't want cams going flat. So I'll probably end up taking this back out. And we're going to work on the main clearances, getting our main caps on. And obviously I showed you guys already cutting up the shim stock. Now it's just a matter of getting the bearing halves in place, measuring everything out. And I'll show you guys the measuring on the last one just to keep it kind of short. But that's the cam bearing install. That's how you check it. Obviously, we got the proper tools to do the proper job, so it makes it easier. And that's it for that. Alright guys, so I mic'd out the crank. I have two mics just to make this easier. That way I don't have to constantly change them. So this is still a standard crank. You know, you want to set up your micrometer to where it'll slide through and you won't have slop side to side, so you know you're going to be in there nice, true, and square. And I try to kind of get a, you know, more or less like a standard between all of them. So even if it's a little different by a few tenths, I'm not going to really worry about it. The whole idea here is to get a constant so I can set up my dial bore gauge and get a good reading out of it. And it's not going to be like a half a thou. I mean, we're talking a couple of tenths between the top and the bottom. The top main journals are a little tighter than the bottom, or so then your 5, 4, and 3 are a little bit wider, and the top is a little bit tighter, so meaning that's a couple tenths. It's not a lot. I'm talking like 3 tenths. But that's a difference between the mic fitting in good at the top and the 1 and 2, and not going in on the 3, 4, and 5. And the middle one was like the splitter between all the top and bottom. It was like a 10th, different than the stack of averages, I guess. So then we go ahead and we set up our bore gauge and zero it out to this, and then we're going to go ahead and stick this in our main bore. We got our bearings in place. I think the camera can catch this. I can move this over a little bit this way, but back to front, we got 3.5 thou clearances vertically, and essentially once you zero it out, you want to put this in here, and you want to kind of find the center, and you're going to read your micrometer, and you're going to kind of find the lowest spot, and again, you got to be dead center. And we got 3.5, and I wish I could show that better on the camera, but usually you would work your way back to front because the bore gauge is only so long. So and again, I'm even right now, I'm just kind of eyeing it up a little differently than I normally would, but our numbers are very good so far. I can tell you that let's move this back out of the way, where it belongs. And I can tell you that my main journal crank diameter is about 2.493, 6 on an average. On the big end, it was 0.4939, and the low side being 6, and I went with the low side. And again, that's like a 10th of a thou. God damn it. And then on the rod journals, it's 2.144, and that was actually straight across the board. That was good. But I either need to make a rod vise or buy one so that I can do these properly and then measure these out. But at this point, theoretically, we could install our crank, but I'm going to hold off and rebag it. And again, take the cam back out and box it. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to also degree the cam, obviously, even though we already know where the cam is at. We know that this whole thing ran, but I'm going to do it. And then I think I'm going to do maybe like a live stream of assembling the whole engine now that everything is going to be blueprinted and we got it good. So far we got 3.5 thou on all the main journal clearances, and on the rods, I think it was a little over 2.5 thou last time I checked, but who knows? We'll find out. And then we're going to have to check our pistons, piston to wall clearance, which I know should be about 5.5, if I remember correctly. And it's the same thing. We're going to actually, the last piston I did was also a 30 over, so this should be fairly close. Back it off some. That's a little tighter, but right there. So then we would, since this is where we're good, I'm going to go ahead and set up my bore gauge, zero this out, and then we're going to measure the bores. And these pistons were all really close, so I'm going to just recheck them all, make sure they're all there on the measurement. Unfortunately, I'm opening up this mic to its max, so I actually don't have an actual number to use. But the important thing is the clearance between the piston and the cylinder wall, and that's what we're going to be after there on that one. And I'm going to take care of that probably after this and call it good until I can get the rod vise and something set up. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this a little bit and have seen it. But our shim stock clearly worked good. It's all in place. Everything is good. Our clearances are good. And I think it's going to be as good as it was. I mean, those bearings all look great after pulling it apart, despite our piston pin walk issue. But I think I'm going to call it a day after I measure out the pistons and the cylinder wall. And those numbers I'll bring up to you guys next video. So hopefully I come up with something for a rod vise in the next couple of days, and we finish doing the last bit, and then it'll be installing the crank. and degreeing the camshaft and going from there. So we'll see you guys around. Share, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.